If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we shall discuss the Road of Kings, one of the philosophical roads of enlightenment adopted by Cainites to control the beast, to better help you roleplay vampires fueled by honor and power. For the most part, everything we have discussed with regards to your vampiric education can be summarized as this. Find a balance between your humanity and beast so you don't become a wight and break the Masquerade. Only, that isn't strictly true, is it? We are taught to put humanity first and beast second. If you did the inverse, well, you would be considered a member of the Sabbat, a state of being we do not allow in our little yacht club. Notice how I referred to that. A state of being, not a road or a path of enlightenment. We have fashioned ethics and codes of conduct that allow us to feign humanity or become one with the beast to work with us. These are not strict moral codes of conduct, but naturally occurring behavior amongst kind and beast respectively. They are, as I said, two states of being, neither of which being the first true road of enlightenment. The first is a road I know very well, as it was a road I once followed. I have hinted at it before, but I shall unveil it properly now. The Via Regalis, otherwise known as the Road of Kings, stretches back to the earliest nights of our existence. Cain declared himself and his chowder superior to the mortals, ruling over the greatest city of the age, the Cainite dominant Enoch. Allegedly, Cain was adamant that his Cainites were not to be worshipped by mortals. In return for the protection and guidance of himself and his chowder, mortals would willingly serve vampires. You know his words were ignored as each Cainite rose to god status by the mortals, who in turn angered God, who destroyed Enoch with the deluge, the flood. Cain went travelling again as the vampires scattered following the destruction of the second city. One vampire took Cain's teachings to heart. Vadartha, sire to Mithras, decided to heed Cain's words. He began laying down the philosophies that would eventually become what we Dark Age vampires would call the Road of Kings, which would also act as the basis of Camarilla tradition. In recognition of these things, many view Vadartha as the proper founder of Via Regalis, with some assuming that he is the Ventrue antediluvian. You might be thinking that the Road of Kings does not sound like much of a path either. Most vampires believe they are above the mortals. Those who follow the Road of Kings, often known as luminaries, don't just see this as a capability, but a rite of passage. These individuals are not just rulers of mortals, but their vampire brethren also, using the lesser clans and neonates to wage their wars for domains. Sound familiar? You may have also noticed that this way of thinking also shares many principles of the Feudal System, which no doubt came after the Road of Kings. In its most basic and distilled form, the feudal system was a social and political system in which landholders provide land to tenants in exchange for their loyalty and service. Those at the bottom, the peasants, farmers, merchants and the like, were barely human, who did not own their land, whilst the royalty at the top, the lords, kings and queens, etc., believe it is the will of God that some men were created to rule over others. God created Cain, who ruled over mortal and vampires in the beginning. Therefore, it is the duty, no, the destiny of the luminaries to rule over all. I should point out that not all followers of the road are this pious, despite this deep connection the Road of Kings has with the Road of Heaven, but they are taught to make their own heaven on earth, to create and rule until their dying breath. And before you ask, yes, cults and the Road of Kings do go together on occasion. Just have a look at Mithras over there. The kind luminaries are a flock that must be shepherded. One must tend to the flock when they are sick and protect them in times of conflict, simply because you will never be in short supply of trusting vassals. Well, that was my reasoning at least. Anyway, it was often a common and necessary motion to instruct the kind not to feed on the diseased and plague-ridden, because they were often as thick as the shit they wallowed in. As you would expect, Dominate and Presence are the two most applied disciplines to those that follow the road. Another reason why this road is often credited to the Ventrue, the ability to lure in mortals and kindred for that matter, forcing them to seal oaths and bind any vassal is invaluable. However, to practice Dominate like this constantly does not make you out to be a terribly strong ruler. Having a bunch of brain-dead followers is of no use to anyone. As for Presence, this is the one most useful to any luminary. One can hold a crowd or a mob entranced by your charisma and, with the right words, can get them to fight and die for you. That said, I would always encourage the use of Presence to augment one's social abilities rather as a substitute. Yes, I do have Presence, remember? How else do you think I sound this charming? But in order to rule others, you have to rule over yourself first, and taming the beast is no easy fight to win. Those who follow the Road of Kings believe that if you do not control the beast, it will tear down all that you have built. Only the strongest of wills can keep the beast at bay, which is something that is taught almost immediately after the embrace. Vampires immediately frenzy, wanting blood, killing whatever is around them for sustenance. Sometimes it is no one of great importance to the vampire, sometimes it is a family member, a friend or a loved one. The beast decided their fate, not the embraced. Those who desire not to be slaves to their inner beast, and to anyone in general really, are perfect candidates for the road. Once you accept this, you are ready to rule over others. But as I said previously, this is no easy task. One's self-control is tempered like one might a sword that you can use to cut at the beast, complemented by a shield of will to protect both you and those you govern from the dangerous maw of the beast, keeping it at bay for the rest of your existence. The Road of Kings is the most structured of all the roads, so you probably won't be surprised to hear that the luminaries follow the traditions impeccably well, encouraging those around them to do the same. They are loyal like this, rarely breaking oaths and promises. Whilst the anarchs that would follow would say otherwise, without law and order, there is pandemonium. With chaos, we are no better than beasts. And who hunts beasts? Mortals. Without rules, without rulers, and the traditions of Cain, one cannot hope to preserve themselves and their kin. To that end, the Lex Teronius, the Blood Hunt, is something luminaries treat with the highest honor, a justice that must be dealt with a swift and clean stroke of their blade. Both vassals and mortals, Cainite and Cain alike, are chosen incredibly carefully for the embrace, as one cannot die the same way a mortal monarch might. The blood of luminaries are royal, so who is given the embrace has to be chosen with the utmost caution, to the point of being rather conservative. The luminary has their own reputation to think about, for the child is considered an extension of the sire. It is not uncommon for some sires to educate their child before their embrace, to see if they truly had what it took to serve their sire and contribute something to society in a meaningful manner, while some do it via ghouling and blood bonding of the participant. I speak from experience here. Why did I do this? It is much easier to teach mortals the ways of our society simply because they are far more open-minded than vampires are. Even you, a smelly, dribbling disappointment of a neonate, took some persuading to your vampiric plight. Anyway, regardless of the method of grooming, the process often takes months or even years to perfect. Excellence and achievement after achievement does not come naturally to most overnight. At this point, you may be wondering what was the outlook of women who followed the Road of Kings during the Dark Ages. I am sure you do not need me to tell you how women were treated during these times, but these attitudes remain with the mortals. Preconceived notions about gender roles die hard, especially when such things are presumed to be divinity ordained, but most kindred understand that undeath levels the playing field somewhat, whether you are male, female, or somewhere in between. If you can lead, you can rule. Whilst mostly associated with the Ventrue, members of all clans can be found in the Road of Kings and its various paths, yes, including my own clan, Clan Nosferatu. The Nosferatu, and many Cappadocians for that matter, found themselves power within the path of the Vizier. The Ramunga probably felt at home within this path also, and if you remember what I told you about the Ramunga and the Cappadocians, their quest for power did not come from being center stage, but by controlling those around them from behind the scenes. They seek knowledge above all else, not wealth or military prowess. Such wisdom is sought after by princes, who give those in low clans like myself some influence. To that end, auspex and animalism are important disciplines, as is obfuscate. A wise prince wouldn't trust a vizier too much though, but do not underestimate a vizier. No, this was not my path. That was the path of the tyrant. Those with this path crave power above all else. Traditions, honor, codes, rituals, etc. are all tools to use to attain power. Whatever allows the tyrant to achieve their goal, they will do it. The feudal system was just as important to any other luminary, but tyrants punished those who defied law severely. I shan't go into detail why your soft-spoken wise Nosferatu once followed this path, but I'm sure you could work it out if you thought about it. Power comes in many forms, most of which returning back to the topic of money. Those who follow the path of the merchant capitalize on this, making their domains warehouses and the like. You will find mostly low clans on this path, especially during the Dark Ages. The path of the Davaraja is practiced by Cainites of India and Malaysia, who believe their rulers are not appointed by God, but a part of him or her, depending on the deity in question. It is a divine inheritance that must be earned. These followers don't create subjects, but worshippers. Now, if that sounds oddly familiar, you will find many Danuva on this path. In the Middle East, you will find followers on the path of Dana, who hold on to the Zoroastrian faith. They do not follow any laws, they become them. This path teaches virtuous acts, and adhering to their laws and duties brings great personal power, according to them at least. It is something they take incredibly seriously. Break the law, and you break society, and one cannot be productive without law. Those last two were fairly uncommon paths to Western Cainites to the Dark Ages, but the path of chivalry was far more recognized. As the name would imply, these followers, called paladins, embrace knighthood ideals. As such, luminaries see them as weak, for paladins serve and do not rule. Perhaps the least ambitious of the followers on the Road of Kings, they serve their fellow man and women, both Cainite and mortal alike, and are the least likely to abuse any power given to them. The path of chivalry would die out by the time the first Anak revolt rolled on by, but the Road of Kings lives on in the modern knights as the path of honourable accord, which encourages its followers to follow the cold logic of the Code of Milan to the letter, meaning this is a path of enlightenment followed by Sabbat members. It is almost identical to the path of chivalry in practice and belief. These modern knight paladins not only strive to differ from humanity, but be better than it. They are virtuous in every sense of the word, but that does not make them good. If the path of Cain is Sabbat's history, the path of honourable accord is the traditions and rite of current knights. Without this path, the Sabbat would have fallen apart years ago. This is what makes it stand out from the path of power and the inner voice. The latter build the power of themselves rather than the sect. This is a path that rejects compassion. Compassion is an emotion, one that distracts the paladin from logic and reason. Their hearts must be made of cold hard steel, for they are at the forefront of every fight and physical conflict. There was a scenario, child, about 10 years ago in the city where vampires of high humanity were hunted by these paladins. I tried warning the prince at the time that this was a common practice for the paladins, but I was ignored, as per usual. That said, I am led to believe that some of our own Camarilla members were part of this siege, which does not surprise me. I had heard this path had the largest crossover with other sects. Members of all clans can be found on this path as a result, but there are a large bulk of Setites, Banu Hakim, Giovanni, and even Ravno on this path. You would be unwise to think this path and the road it originates from is strictly for temporal power gain and ego massaging. The lands they govern and their wealth can only rule so much. The minds and hearts of those they rule also have to be considered. If they do not trust your judgment and are not prepared to die for you in battle, then what sort of monarch are you? The trust in your people is paramount. You may also mistake it for just a variant on the Road of Humanity, but there is one fatal flaw when comparing it directly to the Road of Humanity. The emphasis is on the obedience of the law, responsibility, and the value of honor. But one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. Some also interpret ethics and morals as a means for tyranny, and we all know the evil tyrants performed over the years. But again, this can easily describe the premise of humanity. Well, there is only one real sin in the Road of Kings, and that is failure. Sin against kingship means breaking tradition, not the rules, which there is a difference. Sin against kinship means a personal failing within the kindred and a lack of spiritual fortitude and conviction. Such feelings cause the luminary to degenerate because, to them, they are incredibly embarrassing. Embarrassment leads to shame, shame leads to rage, to hate, and thoughts on revenge, which are the ingredients to waken the beast. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.